Before the story begins, make sure to subscribe. These forgotten, real-life moments of impossible courage deserve to be told, and your support keeps them alive. May 10, 1942. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. The USS California lists 14 degrees to port, her hull groaning against the dock like a dying animal. 30 feet below the waterline, in water so black it swallows flashlight beams whole, Chief Petty Officer James "Red" McGuire kicks against a current that shouldn't exist. His helmet fills with a metallic tang of recycled air. The brass faceplate fogs with each breath. He's been down 42 minutes. The rupture should be here. The engineering report said Section 12, Frame 87. But there's nothing. Just rivets and steel plate, intact and mocking. Above him, the California shudders. Somewhere in her guts, seawater is pouring in at 40 gallons per minute. They've pumped her dry twice today. Both times, she filled again within the hour. Red's gloved hand traces the hull. Smooth. Perfect. Impossible. Topside, I got nothing down here, he rasps into the comm line. Static crackles back. Repeat, no visible damage at coordinates. The ship groans again. This time, Red feels it through the water itself, a bass note that vibrates his sternum. He sweeps his light across the hull one more time. Then he sees it. Not a rupture. Not a crack. Something worse. A weld seam. 14 feet long. Bulging outward by maybe half an inch. Barely visible. The kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, if you didn't know what catastrophic failure looked like in slow motion. Red's breath catches. Jesus Christ. Say again, Red. He doesn't answer. Can't. Because he's counting in his head now. Counting how many other ships came through the yard in the last 6 months. How many got emergency repairs? How many were welded by the same contractors, using the same rush techniques, the same undertrained crews working 20-hour shifts while Japanese submarines prowled the Pacific hunting wounded prey? California, West Virginia, Tennessee, Nevada, Maryland. Red, status. His hand presses against the bulge. The metal is warm. That's wrong. That's pressure. That's the Pacific Ocean trying to punch through a seam that's failing one molecular bond at a time. We got a problem, Red says. We got a big goddamn problem. Copy. Mark it and surface. We'll schedule a... No. Red's voice cuts through the static like a hacksaw. You don't understand. This isn't a patch job. This is structural. This is... The comm line goes dead. Red taps the helmet. Nothing. He yanks the airline. Still flowing. Just the radio then. Bad timing or bad luck or maybe. The current shifts. Red spins, light sweeping the murky water. For a moment, just a moment, he swears he sees movement. Another diver? No. Can't be. He's the only one certified for deep hull work in the entire yard. He turns back to the seam. In the beam of his light, he can see it now. Really see it. The way the weld bead sits proud of the parent metal. The discoloration. The microscopic fractures spider-webbing through the heat-affected zone. This isn't amateur work. This is sabotage. Or worse, this is what passes for acceptable in a nation building ships faster than it can train the men to build them right. Red surfaces 6 minutes later. They pull him onto the dock, water streaming from his suit, and he's already talking, already explaining, but the dock superintendent is shaking his head before Red even removes his helmet. Mark it for repair next week. Next week. Sir, that ship is going to... Next week, Chief. We've got 4 other vessels in critical status and exactly 7 certified welders in this entire yard. You want me to pull one off the Pennsylvania to fix a bulge? Red looks past him. Across the harbor, ships crowd the docks like wounded soldiers waiting for morphine. Battleships. Cruisers. Destroyers. All of them carrying the same scars. All of them repaired by the same desperate hands. All of them, Red realizes, potentially hiding the same fatal flaw. Something's wrong. But no one knows what. December 7, 1941, 6 months earlier. When the first Japanese bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, they didn't just sink ships. They shattered the foundational assumption of American naval warfare, that the Pacific Fleet was untouchable in its home port. 21 vessels damaged. 8 battleships struck. 2,403 dead. But the ships could be salvaged. Bodies could be buried. The harbor could be cleared. What couldn't be easily fixed was the invisible wound the attack inflicted on America's industrial capacity. The sudden, desperate need to repair a fleet faster than logic or craftsmanship allowed. By January 1942, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard was operating at 400% of its designed capacity. Shifts ran around the clock. Welders who'd been farming sugarcane in October were repairing warship hulls by Christmas. The Navy pulled instructors from stateside training facilities and gave them 2 weeks to turn civilians into shipfitters. Quality control became a luxury the nation couldn't afford. The numbers tell the story. Pre-war, average 120 days to complete a major hull repair post-Pearl, average 18 days pre-war. Welder certification required 800 hours of training post-Pearl, 80 hours, sometimes less pre-war, X-ray inspection of all critical welds post-Pearl, visual inspection only, if time permitted. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, faced a brutal calculus. Every day a ship sat in dry dock was a day the Japanese advanced across the Pacific. Guadalcanal. Midway. The Coral Sea. American forces were trading space for time, and time required ships, functional, floating, fighting ships. It didn't matter if those ships were perfect. They just needed to float long enough to reach the enemy. But perfection and adequacy exist on a spectrum, and somewhere on that spectrum lies a threshold. Cross it, and adequacy becomes catastrophe. Red McGuire knew this. He'd been diving commercial salvage in San Francisco before the war, oil rigs, bridge pilings, sunken freighters. He understood metal fatigue. Understood that steel underwater doesn't behave like steel in air. Salt water, pressure, temperature gradients, they all conspired to turn microscopic flaws into ship-killing failures. The Navy didn't want to hear it. "We follow procedure," they said. But the procedure had changed. What used to take 3 men a week now took 1 man a day. What used to require certification now required a pulse and a willingness to climb into a 400-degree compartment with an arc welder. The official reports were optimistic. The California, refloated in March. The West Virginia, back in service by July. The Tennessee, operational by May. Success stories. Propaganda victories. Red read those reports and felt his stomach twist. Because he'd seen the welds. Touched them. Mapped them in the dark water with hands that could read metal like Braille. And what he felt was wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, not yet. But wrong in the way a crack in a dam is wrong. Invisible. Gradual. Inevitable. He filed reports. 7 of them, between January and April. Each one meticulously detailed. Each one warning that the emergency repair protocols were creating systemic vulnerabilities in the fleet's most critical vessels. Each one ignored. Then came May 10th. The California, supposedly ready for sea trials, taking on water through a weld that shouldn't have failed. A seam that passed visual inspection. A seam that would have held fine, in a swimming pool, in calm water. But subjected to the dynamic stress of combat maneuvering, to the concussive shock of depth charges and near-miss bombs, that seam was a time bomb. Red surfaced from that dive knowing 3 things. 1. This wasn't an isolated incident. 2. Every ship repaired in the last 6 months was potentially compromised. 3. No one was going to believe him until a ship sank. And by then, 3,000 men would be dead. The Navy needed a miracle. Or it needed a rebel willing to prove the system was broken, even if proving it meant breaking every regulation in the book. What it got was Red McGuire. And Red McGuire didn't believe in miracles. James Red McGuire. Born 1908. Belfast, Northern Ireland. He was 13 when his father died in the Harland and Wolff shipyard, crushed between a hull plate and a crane hook because someone hadn't checked the rigging. Red learned 2 lessons that day. Steel doesn't forgive mistakes, and the men who build ships are always more expendable than the ships themselves. He emigrated to Boston at 16 with nothing but a journeyman's papers and a hatred of shortcuts. Worked his way west doing bridge construction, dam repair, any job that required a man willing to go underwater in a canvas suit with a copper helmet and pray the air pump didn't fail. By 1935, he was the highest-paid commercial diver in San Francisco, specializing in the jobs other men called suicide: deep salvage, underwater demolition, hull inspections in zero-visibility water. He had a reputation. Careful Red, they called him, which in diving circles was the highest compliment. Careful didn't mean slow. It meant alive. When Pearl Harbor happened, Red was 43, too old for combat duty but exactly the right age for expertise. The Navy grabbed him immediately. Chief Petty Officer, Salvage and Repair Division. They needed men who knew how to work in conditions where a single mistake meant drowning 30 feet underwater while your airline fed you the last breath you'd ever take. Red fit the profile perfectly. Too perfectly. Because the Navy wanted divers who'd follow orders, and Red had spent 27 years learning that orders written in offices killed men working in the field. He didn't look like trouble. Short, compact, with the kind of weathered face that seemed carved from the same stone as the docks. Red hair gone mostly gray. Hands scarred and calloused. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue. When someone gave him an order, he'd nod, say, "Aye," and then do exactly what he thought was right. That tendency nearly got him court-martialed twice in the first 3 months. "You don't have the engineering degree," his commanding officer told him after the second incident. Red had refused to certify a repair on the Nevada, claiming the weld penetration was insufficient even though it met spec. "You're a diver. You go down, you inspect, you surface. You don't interpret." Red had looked at him with those flat gray eyes and said, "Metal doesn't care about your degree, sir. It fails or it doesn't." The weld was redone. 2 weeks later, it cracked during sea trials. Red's report went into a file somewhere. No one apologized. He kept diving. Kept filing reports. Developed a routine. Down at 0600, inspect hulls until 1400, surface, document findings, watch as recommendations get ignored, repeat. He became known as the guy who saw problems everywhere. The pessimist. The old-timer who couldn't adapt to wartime tempo. But the other divers knew better. When they had a question about a questionable seam or a suspicious rivet pattern, they asked Red. When a new civilian welder wanted to know if his work would hold, he waited for Red's inspection. The unofficial word was clear. Red McGuire was the only man in Pearl Harbor who could read underwater welds like a book. He just couldn't convince anyone to read the same book. Until May 10th. Until the California. Until Red surfaced with water still streaming from his helmet and said 5 words that would change everything. "They're all going to sink." The dock superintendent laughed. Nervous laughter, the kind that means someone's worried you might be right but really hopes you're wrong. "All of them. Every ship repaired since January," Red said. He stripped off his gloves methodically, never breaking eye contact. "The California, Nevada, West Virginia, Tennessee, Maryland. 14 vessels. 96 welded seams below the waterline that I've personally inspected in the last 6 weeks. 73 of them show signs of inadequate penetration, improper technique, or structural instability." "Signs aren't failures, Chief." "Not yet," Red agreed. "But physics doesn't negotiate. Those seams are failing. Right now. Slowly. You're just not looking close enough to see it. So what do you want me to do? Pull the entire Pacific Fleet out of service while we re-weld every seam?" Red pulled a folded paper from his dive suit. His report. The one he'd written every day for 6 months. The one no one read. "I want you to let me prove it," he said. "Prove what?" "That I'm right. And that if we don't fix this, we're going to lose more ships to bad welds than to Japanese torpedoes." The superintendent took the report. Skimmed it. Frowned. "This is unorthodox. So is losing a war because we're too proud to admit we're building ships wrong." They stared at each other. Around them, the yard roared with activity. Welders' arcs sparked. Cranes groaned. Men shouted orders. The machinery of war, grinding forward at maximum speed. Red thought about his father. About shortcuts. About the cost of going too fast. "Give me 1 week," he said quietly. 1 week and access to the ship's engineering specs. I'll map every vulnerable seam, document every failure point, and present you with data you can't ignore. And if you're wrong, then I'm wrong. And you can file me under paranoid old divers who should have retired. The superintendent considered this, then nodded. Once. Sharp. 1 week, Chief. But you do this on your own time. I'm not pulling you from inspection rotations. Red smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. I don't sleep much anyway, sir. He walked away before the order could be rescinded. Walked away knowing he just committed to 7 consecutive days of double shifts, no rest, diving into black water to document the slow-motion disaster everyone else refused to see. Walked away knowing that in 7 days, he'd either save the fleet or destroy his career. James "Red" McGuire had been careful his entire life. Now it was time to be reckless. May 11th, 0400 hours. Red stands in the shipyard's records office, surrounded by blueprints that smell like ink and desperation. He's been here 4 hours. Coffee's gone cold in a tin cup near his elbow. His eyes burn. The data is damning. He's cross-referenced dive logs with repair schedules, welder assignments with metallurgical reports. The pattern emerges like a photograph developing in chemical bath. Every ship repaired between January 15th and March 30th shows the same cluster of problematic welds. Same locations. Same techniques. Same contractor. Bainbridge Marine Fabrication. Civilian outfit. Contract awarded December 28, 1941, 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. Fast-tracked approval. Minimal vetting. They'd hired 60 welders in 30 days. Trained them on site. Put them to work on battleship hulls with less oversight than you'd give a man building a toolshed. Red traces his finger along a blueprint of the California. Section 12, Frame 87. The seam he dove yesterday. But his finger doesn't stop there. It moves up, down, across. Finding matching seams. Symmetrical repair points. If one's compromised, they all are. His pulse quickens. He pulls another blueprint. West Virginia. Same contractor. Same date range. Same goddamn seam locations. Tennessee. Maryland. Nevada. All of them. Jesus Christ, all of them. Red does the math in his head. 14 ships. Average of 7 critical below waterline repairs per vessel. Call it 98 high-stress seams. If even 10% are compromised. He stops. Breathes. Forces his mind to slow down. 10% means 9 ships at risk. 9 ships means maybe 30,000 personnel. But that's not how it works in combat. A ship taking on water doesn't just sink. It lists. Loses maneuverability. Becomes a target. Draws escorts to protect it. Disrupts formations. One compromised vessel cascades into tactical disaster. And that's assuming only 10% are bad. Red seen 73 suspect seams. 73 out of 96 inspected. 76%. If that ratio holds across the fleet, he needs to move. He grabs the blueprints, rolls them into a tube, and heads for the door. Outside, dawn is breaking over Pearl Harbor. The water glows pink and gold. Beautiful. Deceptive. Below that mirror surface, ships that look combat-ready are hemorrhaging structural integrity 1 molecule at a time. Red finds Chief Engineer Harrison having breakfast in the officers' mess. He spreads the blueprints across the table, ignoring the eggs and toast they cover. I need you to look at something. Harrison glances up, annoyed. Chief McGuire, do you have an appointment? No, sir. But I have data that indicates systemic structural failure across. Chief. Harrison sets down his fork with precise deliberation. I've read your reports. All 7 of them. They're noted. Noted isn't. Noted means we're aware of your concerns and have determined they don't warrant operational changes at this time. Red plants both hands on the table. Leans in. His voice drops to a whisper that cuts through the ambient chatter like a blade. "Sir, I'm telling you that 3/4 of the ships we've returned to service are one combat engagement away from catastrophic hull failure. And I'm telling you that your analysis is based on visual inspection and conjecture. We have engineers who designed these repairs using established naval architecture principles. Those principles assume adequate weld penetration and proper technique. The civilian contractors are doing the best they can under wartime conditions. We all are." Harrison picks up his fork again. Conversation over. "If you have new evidence of actual failure, not theoretical risk, bring it to me. Until then, these ships are certified for service." Red straightens. Something cold settles in his chest. Understanding. The kind that comes when you realize the people in charge aren't ignorant, they're just playing a different game. They're balancing risk against strategic necessity. They know the welds might be bad. They just need the ships more than they need certainty. It's a reasonable calculation. Unless you're the one who'll drown when the calculation proves wrong. Red walks out of the mess without another word. His mind is racing now, running through options. He could go over Harrison's head. Take his data to Nimitz directly. But admirals don't listen to chiefs, especially chiefs with reputations for being difficult. He could leak the information. Find a journalist. But in wartime, that's treason. He could do nothing. Follow orders. Let someone else shoulder the responsibility. Red's father died because someone didn't check the rigging. Red walks to the equipment shed. He signs out a diving rig. Full kit. Underwater welding attachments. Gas bottles. The works. The petty officer manning the shed frowns. "You've got inspection duty at 0800, Chief. This isn't on the schedule." "Personal project," Red says. "Personal project. Underwater. With welding gear." "That's right." The petty officer considers this. Then shrugs. In a shipyard running on chaos and improvisation, one more irregular requisition barely registers. He signs the form. "Return it by 1800. Red doesn't answer. He's already loading the gear into a cart, already planning his route to the California, already calculating depth, pressure, working time, risk factors. He realizes the truth now. Realizes it with the certainty that only comes from staring at blueprints until your eyes bleed and your coffee goes cold. The system isn't going to fix this. The Navy isn't going to ground the fleet based on his word. They need proof. Not theoretical proof. Not statistical proof. They need empirical, undeniable, quantifiable proof that their repairs are failing. And there's only one way to get that proof. Red has to make the problem visible. Has to take a compromised seam and push it to failure under controlled conditions. Document the collapse. Show them in real time what happens when you cut corners on structural integrity. It's the only way they'll listen. It's also probably illegal. Definitely against regulations. Potentially career-ending. And if he's wrong, if his analysis is off, if he's being paranoid, if those seams are actually fine, then he'll have sabotaged a naval vessel during wartime. Court-martial. Leavenworth. Disgrace. Red loads the last gas bottle onto the cart. He realizes the truth. But proving it will cost him everything. The sun is fully up now. The shipyard hums with morning activity. Somewhere in an office, Harrison is finishing his eggs, secure in the knowledge that procedures are being followed. Red pushes the cart toward the dock. "If I don't do this, people die. That's the only math that matters." May 11th, 2300 hours. The California floats dark and empty at her berth. Most of her crew has been temporarily reassigned while final repairs continue. Only a skeleton watch remains, 3 men topside who'd rather be sleeping. Red approaches from the south dock, moving through shadows like he's done this before. Maybe he has. 27 years of diving teaches you how to be invisible when necessary. The gear is already aboard, stashed this afternoon behind a canvas tarp near the stern. No one noticed. No one ever notices maintenance equipment. He strips to his undergarments in the humid night air. The dive suit goes on piece by piece. Canvas body, weighted belt, boots that could sink a corpse. He works methodically, checking each seal, each connection. Careful Red. Always careful, even when breaking every rule in the manual. The welding rig is modified commercial equipment, not Navy issue. Red had it shipped from a supplier in San Diego 3 months ago, paid out of pocket, kept it in his personal locker. He'd known, even then, that someday he'd need to prove something the Navy wouldn't let him prove officially. That day is tonight. The helmet comes last. Brass and glass. 40 pounds of copper and lead. He locks it into place, taps the faceplate. The world becomes muffled, distant. His breath echoes in the confined space. Red waddles to the edge of the ship, weighted and clumsy. Below, the harbor water is black. Somewhere down there, 30 feet deep, Section 12 Frame 87 is quietly failing. Has been failing for weeks. Red's going to accelerate the process. He's going to stress test a bad weld until it cracks. Then he's going to fix it. Then he's going to show them the data. It's insane. It's methodical. It's the only way. Red checks his airline one last time. Tugs the signal rope. No response needed. He's going down alone, no tender, no safety diver, no witnesses. Just him and the black water and a hypothesis that might save the fleet or end his career. He steps off the edge. The water takes him like gravity takes a stone. Down through the thermal layers. Down past the point where light exists. His helmet lamp carves a cone of murky visibility. Fish scatter. Below, the California's hull emerges from darkness, a wall of riveted steel extending into nothing. Red's depth gauge reads 28 feet. He equalizes pressure, jaw cracking. Finds the seam by memory and touch. The frame 87. The bulge is more pronounced now than it was yesterday. Stress accumulating. Metal crying out in a language only pressure can speak. Red sets up the stress test rig. It's crude but effective, a hydraulic jack braced against the hull, connected to a pressure gauge. He'll apply force to the seam. Incrementally. Scientifically. Pushing until the weld yields. Then he'll measure the failure point, compare it to engineering specs, and have his proof. He cranks the jack. Once. Twice. The gauge climbs. 50 psi. 100. 150. The seam holds. 200 psi. Red's breathing is loud inside the helmet. Steady. Controlled. He watches the weld bead, looking for the first sign of separation. Microfractures propagating through heat-affected metal. Come on. Show me. 250. The ship groans. The sound travels through water and steel and bone. Red feels it in his chest. The California is a 32,000-ton warship, and somewhere in her guts, she's registering pain. 300 psi. The seam splits. Not catastrophically, just a hairline crack, maybe an inch long, weeping a stream of bubbles. But it's enough. It's proof. That weld should hold to 500 psi minimum according to spec. It failed at 300. Red releases the jack immediately. Can't let the crack propagate. Can't actually damage the ship. He pulls out his underwater camera, another personal purchase, another piece of unofficial equipment, and photographs the failure from 3 angles. Documents the pressure reading. Measures the crack with calipers. Then he gets to work. The underwater welding rig fires up with a hiss of gas. Red strikes an arc. The water around the electrode boils instantly, creating a bubble of steam where the weld pool forms. It's delicate work, welding underwater. The heat dissipates too fast. The metal cools unevenly. But Red's been doing this since most of the shipyard welders were in diapers. He runs a bead along the crack. Slow. Steady. Watching the penetration. This is how it should have been done the first time. This is what happens when you don't rush. When you care more about the work than the schedule. 20 minutes later, the repair is complete. Red inspects it with his light. Perfect penetration. No porosity. No inclusions. The kind of weld that'll outlast the ship itself. He sets up the jack again. Cranks it. 50 psi. 100. 200. 300. 400. The new weld holds. 500 psi. Still holding. 600. The weld holds. The parent metal around it starts to deform slightly, the steel itself yielding before the weld fails. That's what you want. That's what proper technique gives you. Red releases the jack. Takes more photos. Documents everything. He has his proof now. Evidence that the original contractor's work was substandard and that proper welding technique can fix it. All he needs to do is surface, present his data, and watch the Navy's repair protocols change overnight. All he needs to do is admit he conducted unauthorized structural testing on a combat vessel using personal equipment without oversight or approval. All he needs to do is confess to what amounts to sabotage. Red floats there in the dark water, weighing options. He could surface, strip the gear, stash it, claim ignorance. Just file another report about discovering a crack during routine inspection. They'd never know about the stress test. Never know he deliberately induced failure. But they also wouldn't have the comparative data. Wouldn't understand why the crack formed. Wouldn't see the difference between bad work and good work. Wouldn't change anything. Red cranks the jack onto the original seam one more time. Slowly. Until he reaches 300 psi again. Holds it there. Lets the pressure accumulate. The crack opens wider. 2 inches now. Still controllable. Still reparable. But unmistakably failed. He photographs it. Measures it. Documents it with the clinical precision of a man building a legal case against himself. Then he welds it properly. Then he surfaces. The night air hits him like a slap. He breaks the surface near the stern, away from the watch rotation. Hauls himself up using the mooring line. Water streams from his suit. His legs shake, adrenaline and exertion and the weight of what he's just done. Red strips the gear methodically. Stashes it. Stands there dripping and shaking in the Hawaiian night. In his pocket, waterproofed and documented, is the evidence that will either save the fleet or end his career. Probably both. He looks up at the California. She floats proud and dark, seemingly solid. To everyone else, she's a symbol of American resilience. Sunk at Pearl Harbor, raised, repaired, ready to fight again. Only Red knows she's been held together by luck and bad welds and the naive assumption that steel always does what it's told. Not anymore. Red dries off, dresses, and walks toward the base headquarters. It's nearly 0100. But he knows Harrison works late. Knows he'll be in his office, reviewing tomorrow's schedules, managing the impossible mathematics of wartime shipbuilding. Red's going to show him different mathematics. The kind written in cracked metal and boiling seawater 30 feet below the surface. He's going to try it tonight. Not try the weld, that's already done. Try the truth. Try explaining to a career officer that every shortcut they've taken is a debt that physics will eventually collect. Try making them understand that courage isn't always about firing shots. Sometimes it's about admitting you've been firing wrong. May 12, 01:30 hours. Chief Engineer Harrison's office. Red doesn't knock. Just opens the door and walks in, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood floor. Harrison looks up from his paperwork, irritation flashing across his face. Chief McGuire. It's past midnight and you're dripping on my... Red dumps the waterproof case on Harrison's desk. Film canisters. Pressure readings. Caliper measurements. A handwritten log documenting every step of tonight's unauthorized operation. The California has a compromised seam at Section 12, Frame 87. Failed at 300 psi under controlled stress testing. Specification minimum is 500. That's a 40% structural deficiency. Red's voice is flat. Factual. The voice of a man who's run out of patience for politics. I have photographic evidence, pressure data, and comparative analysis of proper versus improper welding technique. I also have probable cause to believe 73 additional seams across 14 vessels show similar deficiencies. Harrison stares at the case. Then at Red. Then back at the case. You stress-tested a hull seam? Without authorization? Yes, sir. On a combat vessel? Yes, sir. Using personal equipment? Yes, sir. Chief McGuire. Harrison stands slowly. His face is doing complicated things: anger, disbelief, concern, all fighting for dominance. Do you understand what you've just confessed to? I understand I conducted unauthorized structural testing that could be interpreted as sabotage, Red says. I also understand that if we don't re-inspect and re-weld those seams before those ships see combat, we're going to lose vessels and personnel to preventable structural failure. That's not your determination to make. Then whose is it? Red's voice finally breaks, not into shouting, but into something rawer. More honest. Sir, I've been filing reports for 6 months. 6 months of documented concerns, technical analysis, and professional recommendations. All ignored. All filed away. Meanwhile, we're sending ships to war with welds that won't hold under combat stress. Someone has to. Someone has to follow the chain of command. Harrison's fist hits the desk. The film canisters jump. You think you're the only one who sees problems? You think you're the only one losing sleep? We have strategic imperatives that outweigh individual vessel reliability. Imperatives don't patch hull breaches, sir. They stare at each other. The office is silent except for the ceiling fan's rhythmic whisper and the distant sound of nighttime shipyard operations. Red realizes his hands are shaking. Realizes this is the moment. Right here. Either Harrison looks at the data or he doesn't. Either the Navy admits there's a problem or it doesn't. Either 3,000 men die eventually or they don't. Harrison sits back down. Slowly. He picks up one of the film canisters. Turns it over in his hands. This could end your career. Yes, sir. This could result in court-martial. Yes, sir. Why would you risk that? Red thinks about his father. About shortcuts. About the men who'll crew those ships, who'll trust those welds with their lives, who'll never know they're sailing in vessels held together by speed and hope and prayer. Because the risk of doing nothing is higher, sir. Harrison opens the canister. Pulls out the film strips. Holds them up to the desk lamp. His eyes narrow. Red can see the exact moment comprehension hits. The moment Harrison sees the crack, sees the pressure readings, sees the before and after comparison. Jesus Christ, Harrison whispers. Yes, sir. 300 psi. 300. The re-weld I performed held to 600 before I stopped testing. Harrison lays the film on his desk like it might explode. He's quiet for a long time. Then he reaches for his phone. Get me Admiral Nimitz's aid. I don't care what time it is. Red's chest tightens. This is it. Either vindication or destruction. No middle ground. Harrison waits for the connection. His eyes never leave the photographs. This is Chief Engineer Harrison. I need an emergency meeting with Admiral Nimitz at 0600. Priority Alpha. Yes, I understand the Admiral's schedule. Tell him we have a potential fleet-wide structural crisis. I'll brief him personally. He hangs up. Looks at Red. You're confined to base until further notice. Don't talk to anyone. Don't file any reports. Don't so much as breathe wrong. Understood? Yes, sir. And Chief, if you're wrong about this, if these photographs don't show what you think they show, I'll personally escort you to the brig. I'm not wrong, sir. Harrison almost smiles. Almost. I hope to God you are. Red leaves the office. Walks through the empty shipyard. The California floats in her berth, oblivious to the chaos her compromised hull has just triggered. Somewhere in the Pacific, Japanese submarines hunt for wounded American ships. They won't have to hunt much longer if Red's right. But if Red's right, the Navy now knows. And knowing is the first step toward fixing. Red finds a bench near the water. Sits. Waits for dawn. Waits for the judgment that will decide whether he saved the fleet or destroyed his career. Both, probably. Let's find out. May 13th, 1400 hours. Admiral Nimitz stands in the shipyard's engineering bay, surrounded by 20 officers, 5 civilian contractors, and 1 exhausted chief petty officer. On the table before him, Red's photographs, enlarged to poster size. The crack at 300 psi. The weld defect magnified 50 times. The comparative analysis that damns 6 months of emergency repairs. Gentlemen, Nimitz says quietly, we have a problem. The next 72 hours unfold like dominoes falling. Nimitz orders immediate reinspection of all vessels repaired by Bainbridge Marine Fabrication. Red's assessment proves conservative. It's not 73 compromised seams. It's 91. Across 16 ships, not 14. The Oklahoma, previously cleared for service, is found to have stress fractures spiderwebbing through her main structural welds. She would have sunk within a week of reaching open ocean. Bainbridge's contract is terminated. 3 executives are arrested for fraud. Turns out they'd been inflating their welders' credentials, billing for certified personnel while employing untrained laborers. The kind of corner cutting that makes sense on a balance sheet until steel starts failing at depth. The Navy establishes new protocols immediately. Mandatory X-ray inspection of all below waterline welds, no exceptions. Certification requirements reinstated to pre-war standards. Repair schedules extended to allow proper technique. It adds weeks to every repair cycle, months to the overall recovery timeline. But the ships that emerge are actually seaworthy. On May 16th, Red is called before a review board. He expects court-martial. Gets commendation instead. Navy Cross for extraordinary initiative and technical expertise in identifying and resolving a critical threat to fleet operational readiness. The citation doesn't mention unauthorized stress testing. Doesn't mention breaking regulations. Politics has a way of rewriting history when history proves you right. But the other divers know. The enlisted men know. Word spreads through the yard in whispers and handshakes. Red Maguire broke the rules to prove the rules were broken. Risked everything to show that speed isn't the same as strength. He becomes a legend in the way working men create legends, not through medals or newspaper articles, but through quiet respect and the knowledge that someone, somewhere, gave a damn about doing things right even when right was expensive and slow and politically inconvenient. Harrison finds him 3 days later, standing on the dock watching re-weld operations. Neither man speaks for a moment. Then, we're pulling 6 ships out of service for 3 months, Harrison says. Complete reinspection and re-weld of all critical seams. Nimitz is furious. Not at you, at the situation. At himself, probably, for not catching it sooner. Will it be enough time? Red asks. It'll have to be. We're training new welders using your techniques as the baseline. Proper penetration. Proper cooling. Proper inspection. The way it should have been done from the start. Harrison pauses. You know, if you'd been wrong about this, if those seams had held and you'd just been paranoid, we'd have wasted months of operational time chasing ghosts. But I wasn't wrong. No, Harrison agrees. You weren't. Which is either impressive intuition or dumb luck. Red almost smiles. 27 years of diving teaches you to spot problems before they kill you. And breaking regulations? Who taught you that? Red thinks about his father. About the rigging that wasn't checked. About the men who make rules and the men who die when rules replace thinking. Steel did, he says. Steel doesn't care about regulations. It just cares about stress and time and whether you respected it enough to do the work right. Harrison nods. Extends his hand. They shake, officer and enlisted, engineer and diver, both understanding that victory often looks like extra months in port and contractors going to jail and ships that don't sink because someone refused to accept good enough. For what it's worth, Chief, I'm glad you were stubborn. For what it's worth, sir, I'm glad you listened. Harrison walks away. Red stays on the dock, watching welders swarm over the California's hull like ants repairing a wound. The work will take months. Will delay combat deployment. Will cost millions. Will save thousands. Not all victories happen at sea. Some happen 30 feet underwater in black water with a pressure gauge and the stubborn refusal to let shortcuts kill people. Red lights a cigarette. The sun is setting over Pearl Harbor, painting the water gold and red. Beautiful. Deceptive. Below that surface, men are welding seams properly, slowly, carefully. The way it should have been done all along. He changed everything. And if his name appears in Navy records as anything more than a line item notation, Red would be surprised. But the ships float properly now. That's all that matters. May 12th, 01:30 hours. Chief Engineer Harrison's office. Red doesn't knock. Just opens the door and walks in, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood floor. Harrison looks up from his paperwork, irritation flashing across his face. Chief McGuire. It's past midnight and you're dripping on my... Red dumps the waterproof case on Harrison's desk. Film canisters. Pressure readings. Caliper measurements. A handwritten log documenting every step of tonight's unauthorized operation. The California has a compromised seam at Section 12, Frame 87. Failed at 300 psi under controlled stress testing. Specification minimum is 500. That's a 40% structural deficiency. Red's voice is flat. Factual. The voice of a man who's run out of patience for politics. I have photographic evidence, pressure data, and comparative analysis of proper versus improper welding technique. I also have probable cause to believe 73 additional seams across 14 vessels show similar deficiencies. Harrison stares at the case. Then at Red. Then back at the case. You stress-tested a hull seam? Without authorization? Yes, sir. On a combat vessel? Yes, sir. Using personal equipment? Yes, sir. Chief McGuire. Harrison stands slowly. His face is doing complicated things. Anger, disbelief, concern, all fighting for dominance. Do you understand what you've just confessed to? I understand I conducted unauthorized structural testing that could be interpreted as sabotage, Red says. I also understand that if we don't re-inspect and re-weld those seams before those ships see combat, we're going to lose vessels and personnel to preventable structural failure. That's not your determination to make. Then whose is it? Red's voice finally breaks, not into shouting, but into something raw. More honest. Sir, I've been filing reports for 6 months. 6 months of documented concerns, technical analysis, and professional recommendations. All ignored. All filed away. Meanwhile, we're sending ships to war with welds that won't hold under combat stress. Someone has to. Someone has to follow the chain of command. Harrison's fist hits the desk. The film canisters jump. You think you're the only one who sees problems? You think you're the only one losing sleep? We have strategic imperatives that outweigh individual vessel reliability. Imperatives don't patch hull breaches, sir. They stare at each other. The office is silent except for the ceiling fan's rhythmic whisper and the distant sound of nighttime shipyard operations. Red realizes his hands are shaking. Realizes this is the moment. Right here. Either Harrison looks at the data or he doesn't. Either the Navy admits there's a problem or it doesn't. Either 3,000 men die eventually or they don't. Harrison sits back down. Slowly. He picks up one of the film canisters. Turns it over in his hands. This could end your career. Yes, sir. This could result in court-martial. Yes, sir. Why would you risk that? Red thinks about his father. About shortcuts. About the men who'll crew those ships, who'll trust those welds with their lives, who'll never know they're sailing in vessels held together by speed and hope and prayer. Because the risk of doing nothing is higher, sir. Harrison opens the canister. Pulls out the film strips. Holds them up to the desk lamp. His eyes narrow. Red can see the exact moment comprehension hits. The moment Harrison sees the crack, sees the pressure readings, sees the before and after comparison. Jesus Christ, Harrison whispers. Yes, sir. 300 psi. 300. The re-weld I performed held to 600 before I stopped testing. Harrison lays the film on his desk like it might explode. He's quiet for a long time. Then he reaches for his phone. Get me Admiral Nimitz's aide. I don't care what time it is. Red's chest tightens. This is it. Either vindication or destruction. No middle ground. Harrison waits for the connection. His eyes never leave the photographs. This is Chief Engineer Harrison. I need an emergency meeting with Admiral Nimitz at 0600. Priority Alpha. Yes, I understand the Admiral's schedule. Tell him we have a potential fleet-wide structural crisis. I'll brief him personally. He hangs up. Looks at Red. You're confined to base until further notice. Don't talk to anyone. Don't file any reports. Don't so much as breathe wrong. Understood? Yes, sir. And Chief, if you're wrong about this, if these photographs don't show what you think they show, I'll personally escort you to the brig. I'm not wrong, sir. Harrison almost smiles. Almost. I hope to God you are. Red leaves the office. Walks through the empty shipyard. The California floats in her berth, oblivious to the chaos her compromised hull has just triggered. Somewhere in the Pacific, Japanese submarines hunt for wounded American ships. They won't have to hunt much longer if Red's right. But if Red's right, the Navy now knows. And knowing is the first step toward fixing. Red finds a bench near the water. Sits. Waits for dawn. Waits for the judgment that will decide whether he saved the fleet or destroyed his career. Both, probably. Let's find out.